it started out just as a little seed. I mean, as I was first sitting on the back step, and there was the sense of, I need to work with children in this way that really is a sense of respecting and trusting each child and letting to see what happens. That little seed has blossomed to working with 30 children and about 10 children individually, involving the whole community. I mean, I think that the reason why this is working and growing as well as it is because it's coming from the children. They are deciding what it is, and it's unfolding from them. And so the power that it has is limitless. It's like there's so much potential there as to what it might be. I had intended that I would eventually work with adults, but even before I got to that point, I had this little studio in the backyard of our house, and I had a little area to do woodworking and painting and whatever. And this 10-year-old boy started coming over to our house, and he was really interested in what was happening in that room, and we'd start working together, and he'd share me his dreams, and at the same time, I was sort of struggling with, well, what am I going to do? Now I've got a master's degree, and here I am in Port Townsend, and what am I going to do? And then much later, when I became more focused on working with adults, and actually set this space up here, and found this chair in a garage sale, and felt like, all right, now I'm ready, and the first client that came to me, parents called me and asked me if I'd work with their 5-year-old boy. And my immediate reaction was, well, I don't work with children. Of course, I wasn't working with adults yet either. Upstairs he came and took one look at the sand tray, and his eyes just lit up, and he took off his shoes and socks, and he climbed right in. So I thought maybe I better read some books about this. I don't think this is supposed to happen. And then the next client that came was 6 years old, and it suddenly became clear to me that this is what I was doing. So I thought it would be important to have a business card, so I made up a business card and it said child therapist on it in a Jungian way. And I continued to work in that way for about 1.5 years, and had worked with about 10, 12 children at different times. And then one day I was at the computer, and I was really working intensely on some writing, and I suddenly realized that I hadn't taken a break, and I was hungry, so I stopped. I went outside, and I sat on the back step and was looking at the cherry tree out here. And suddenly just like this flash just came. And with it was this just strong thought that I needed to change what was happening. And that I had lost what I had had with that boy in the workshop a couple of years before. And that that's really what I wanted to be doing, what I needed to be doing. And so it was sort of looking at, well, what had happened. What had happened was this sort of structure had come around working with kids. It involved charging money by the hour for a fee. It involved being closely involved with the parents, the children coming because of the parents. And all of that tended to take away from what was happening and what I had experienced with that first boy. It just hit me that what I really wanted to do was be with children like I was being with that 10-year-old boy. Though that was in a very unstructured setting, there wasn't anything that you could say. There was no name you could put to what was happening with that. As the idea of working with children without a strict structure and the sense of freedom of choice of children coming here, that began to grow. And at the same time, I began to have dreams about working with the children in groups as well. And one of the ideas that came about was working with children in creating a newspaper, a children's newspaper for Port Townsend. And when I woke up, it was like, I don't know anything about printing. I don't know anything about newspapers. I don't particularly like to write in that fashion. What's this all about? I don't understand this. But it came so strongly that I felt I needed to act in it in some way. So I called a group of children together. They were mostly neighborhood children, brothers and sisters of about 3 or 4 families. And I just proposed the idea to them. What do you think about doing a newspaper for Port Townsend? And they were very responsive, very excited about it. And it was my intention to let the paper be whatever it may be. It didn't have to follow any particular form. And so one little 9-year-old boy said he wanted to do the weather report, and I said, great. And somebody else was going to do something about sports, and somebody wanted to take pictures. And so we just sort of let it be, and we decided that it would be fun to have the first issue come out before Halloween and have it be sort of a Halloween issue. So we set a date and went ahead with creating this newspaper. Well, we're now in the 2nd year. It comes out once a month. And one day when the children met, the children that became involved, that whole process grew and changed too, because different children would drop out and other children would bring friends, until we finally ended up with sort of a core group of about 26 to 30 children that work on the paper. And now we're in its 2nd year. And as the children would come after school, all this work on the paper, this is not a school activity. So the children are choosing to do this outside of school, doing the writing the articles and doing interviews and doing the weather report and whatever. That they would be getting together, and I noticed that that whole process of their just being together was a really important part of it all. And they'd like to play music, and they would dance and sing, and it sort of grew to the idea of, well, why don't we put on some kind of a show? We'll work on the paper, but also while we're together, we'll work on some songs and skits and put on a show. So they ended up doing that. Now, both the paper and the skit and the show, they needed names too. The children, interestingly enough, do not use the name Bergita House very much. That was a name that was my name that came to me in a dream. And they needed to have a name for the paper. And it was real clear it wasn't going to have anything to do with Bergita. And the name that they came up with was What? With this question mark in the middle. And the name for their skit show came up to be Monday Night Live. So this past year, they finally, the first performance we just did in my house. And up until this point, all this activity was happening in our home. And finally, they decided that they wanted to really do it for the town, so they worked, and just this last month, they did a show for the town. We had about 150 people came in the town, and they collected $47, which they were just thrilled with until they figured out that it just covered expenses for the night. It was a shock. So there's this group activity too, and it's like some children need the quiet one-on-one, more protected space. And what I am realizing is that for other children, that same kind of honoring and trusting of what they are can happen and needs to happen in a group environment. Now, these children last year were mostly in 6th grade, and now they're in 7th grade. And their energy's changing, things are shifting, and there's a lot of peer pressure, and even more need to be together in groups. Well, some of those children that work on the paper and work on the skit shows and other things that they do also choose to come and work with me individually. So there's sort of this back and forthness. As the children were growing older, and this whole idea of needing more chaos and needing more room, it became real clear that they needed a space other than our house. Besides that, my husband's office is in our house, and I have a 13-year-old son who's involved with us in and out, and he needed his own space too. So it was not working to have them meet in our house anymore. But, okay, that's nice, but what are you going to do? Well, the house next door became available for rent. The paper had been publishing over the summer, and someone anonymously gave the children a gift of paying for the printing for the paper all summer. And that amounted to about $600, which then gave us some money. First of all, we went on a little summer trip, gave us some money to go on a camping trip with all the children. But it also gave us enough money to consider the possibility of renting this house for a couple of months. So not knowing how that it was going to sustain itself, it just felt like it was meant to be. The house was there, it was available, and we needed to rent it. So the first day that it was available for the children, they all came. And I figured that they would work on the latest Monday Night Live or the paper or whatever. And all they wanted to do, they just wanted to clean house. And they came over to my house and they got all my mops and my brooms and they washed the windows in and out twice. They worked in the garden. They wanted to plant bulbs, cut the hedge. And then when it got to be late in the afternoon, they said, we need to spend the night. And I thought, no. This isn't, when you ask what my role is, I didn't think this was part of my role. But then it became real clear to me that they somehow needed to nest in this place. They needed to be there. They were boys and girls. And so I said, okay. So we got a bunch of pizzas and sat around, and they all spent the night there in sleeping bags on the floor. So now there's this whole question about this whole issue of the house. And there's a long, wonderful, beautiful story about meeting a woman who is now, we're in the process of purchasing the house for Bergita House so that we don't have to worry about it being rented to somebody else or losing the house. So that has opened up this whole possibility now of the children having this house, and they can't wait to, they want to fix it up, they want to knock down a wall, they want to paint. When their parents come and pick them up, they can't believe that that the children are doing this. So the question becomes, you know, why? Why do they have all this energy at that house to clean and scrub and paint, and they just decorated it all for Halloween, and then they go home and their energy shifts and is different? What's that all about? You know, what's going on? There's a real lack of respect for children today, to be children. There's an over-anxiousness for them to be grown up. That to me the key has been, and it's not easy for me, it's something I really have to work hard with, but the key has been that the children have a sense that what they are all about and what they're doing is trusted and respected around Bergita House. So if they wash the walls and they're all streaked, that's okay. You know, it doesn't matter. And I mean, and sometimes I really have to hold myself back because I tend to be a rather meticulous person in a lot of ways. But I have to check that that's not what this is all about. And I think that as parents, I mean, the adults in the community are amazed that these children, by themselves, go downtown and get advertising for the paper. And they go into a store they've never been in before. And they talk to adults that they don't know. And they ask for money for the paper. And they're proud of the paper, and they show them this is what we do. And the community has been real supportive in putting ads in the paper. But they're doing that all on their own. And it's, you know, at first it was real hard for them, and they wanted me to be right by their side. But now they've learned that they can do it, and they find out what comes out after that. They get to put this paper, which they're very proud of. They're very proud when they do Monday Night Live. So the community has been, I mean, many people have come up to me in awe that the children do this and that they do this by themselves. So I think as more and more parents and people in the community see that the children are really capable and able of doing this and that it really is in them. They're not, Cairo Television's coming over next week to do an interview of the children and to find out, to film the whole process of making the paper. So the children were sitting around the other day talking about what they might say on television. And they thought, well, they're probably going to ask us what we like about this, why we like to do this. And so they were sitting around, and it was real interesting for me to hear them talk about this because the cameras weren't there. And they were just talking about this among themselves. And they said, well, you know, if I weren't here, sitting here in Bergita House right now, I'd be home watching TV. Or I'd be home just sitting around doing nothing or talking on the phone. I mean, when I think about all the things that I do, almost everything I do is outside of school has to do with getting ready for Monday Night Live and practicing and thinking about what I want to have in the paper next month. And so they know that in themselves. They see that happening. And the parents are seeing that that's happening. I mean, at first, parents were a little questioning about why these kids want to go over to Jean Ruff's house all the time. You know, what's going on over there? And in fact, there were more than one set of parents that only let the children come one day a week. Well, all that's changed now. I mean, they've seen Monday Night Live. They've seen the paper. I mean, it's really nice to have a tangible product for the kids. And so there's more of a trusting now with the parents, too. One child once said that my parents now give me a lot more freedom because they see when they've given me freedom what happens. I mean, it's wonderful. But the key is that it comes from the child. Whatever it is, it's coming from the child. When I try to impose my own will with the children, it doesn't work. Like, for instance, to me, this all was Bergita House. But to them, that wasn't their name. To them, it's what. They've got what T-shirts, what banners. They want to call it the what in. You know, that's their name. The other day, someone suggested that we show a movie that was made in Port Townsend, a fairy tale, and that we show it, and the children do it, and that the money, there'd be a fundraiser for Bergita House. So I went over and proposed this to the children, and they said no way. They didn't want to do it. I mean, if it had been another idea, maybe they would have responded. But the point is that the children didn't respond, and so it's not going to happen. But what came out of that discussion was, in talking about the possibility of showing the movie, came out the possibility of doing a bake sale with it. And the bake sale they got really excited about. So now they're thinking, well, maybe they'll have a bake sale, but they don't want to do the movie, you know. Sometimes, I mean, it was their idea to get Cairo Television to come over here. I didn't know anything about it. I just got a call one day on the telephone. Hello, this is so-and-so from Cairo TV. We want to come over and film the kids doing what? And one of the children had found the address and the name of somebody over in Cairo Television and wrote a letter and sent them a couple of what newspapers and said, you should come over and film us. The children need some structure. More and more, for instance, the paper, they're putting out more and more of the paper themselves. We're a little bit limited because the computer is in one house and the children are in another house, so I tend to do a lot of the typing. They haven't learned how to type yet. It would take them forever to type all that into the computer. But that's not the whole issue of where I fit in, what role is needed from me and what's needed from me from the children is constantly in flux. It's always changing. And it's right now, you know, there's this group of older children that are now going into junior high, and their needs are very different than the younger group of children that are involved, which is growing. We've got about 10 or 12 third, fourth, and fifth graders now. And in fact, they're coming on different days because their energy's just in a different place than these seventh and eighth graders. They need to have something there. It's like they need to have the box of saltine crackers and the apple juice available. They need some tools available. And it's sort of my process to constantly, it's always watching to see what's happening because I never know. What is needed right now? What are the children needing right now? Well, right now, I mean, they just did Monday Night Live for the town. So I thought, well, they'll probably end up going and doing it for the different schools or traveling to other places now that they've got this great show. But the energy just went, psh, it wasn't there anymore. And now it's all focused on this house. They want to fix up the house, they want to fix up the garden, they want to rototill the backyard and plant grass seed. Well, so now my energy is having to support them in that way. Okay, they need the house. All right, it's real clear we need to have this house. So that all is falling into place. Someone is buying the house. So I've suddenly become realtor and banker and whatever to try to make that happen for the children. Last night was Halloween, and they wanted to, a couple of them said, the parents said, you're too old to trick or treat. So they said, well, we'll go over to Bergita House and serve candy and decorate the house and do it through Bergita House. So they did that. But they needed some support in order to make that happen. They want to fix over the house, but obviously I mentioned that to one of the bankers, and I think maybe in mistake, because I could see him just sort of, the kids are going to do this house. But, you know, we're going to hire an electrician to redo some of the wiring, and there are a couple of children that are real interested in learning about wiring, so I'll help set it up so that the electrician's there when the kids are there, and that those that want to learn can learn. And some of the things, obviously, adults are going to have to do. But it takes a lot of work to sort of set up the environment and the time so that they have this sense of freedom and space to do what they need to do. The three of us being here and creating this film is somehow a statement about the value of what this is. The prospect of having any money at all. I mean, I have received no money for doing very little anyway in over a year. And the prospect of receiving any money for myself in payment of what I'm doing overwhelms me. I mean, I just been filled with tears many times at that prospect of what does that mean? I mean, it means that somebody else out there also sees the value in what's happening here. Enough to act in some way to support that. I'm not sure where it's leading to. It's just sort of this natural unfolding process that just keep following.